The Vault of the North, Episode 5, Money Changes the Noise. Tony Reyes came home from Scotland with sealed vaults behind him, and something he could not yet name living quietly inside his bones. The sensing was gone. The ability to feel the land, to read danger before it arrived, to know the world through something deeper than eyes and ears, that had been taken as payment. But something else had been left behind, and Tony was about to find out what it cost to use it. London smelled different when you had been gone. Tony stepped off the train at Paddington, and the city rushed at him like a wave. Noise, heat, perfume, and sweat, and engine fumes. The beep of Oyster cards, the click of shoes, the hum of 100,000 lives pressing together in a space designed for half that many. He had been gone for 11 days. 11 days in Scotland, in small towns, in a vault, beneath a hill, in the back seats of cars driven by people who carried coins that spoke to the land. Now he was back, and the city hid him like a language he used to speak fluently, but had forgotten the rhythm of. Tony shifted his backpack higher on his shoulder. The map sat inside it, folded in its plastic sleeve, quiet for now. The consequence, inside his chest, sat still, cold and patient, like a cat's sleeping with one eye open. He walked through the station, and the world watched him, not dramatically. Not like a celebrity, just differently. A woman wheeling a suitcase glanced at him, and her stride broke for half a second. A man buying coffee at a stand near the exit turned his head and forgot what he had been saying to the barista. A child in a pushchair stared at Tony with wide, unblinking eyes, as if he were made of light the adults could only half see. Tony kept his head down, hood up, shoulders tight, but the visibility did not care about hoods. That was the permanent cost, the price of offering. The custodian had stripped away his ability to pass unnoticed, and nothing he wore, nothing he did, nothing he hid behind could undo it. Tony caught the tube toward Acton, sat in a corner seat, watched the stations blur past through smudged glass. His body felt different, too. He had noticed it on the train south, a steadiness in his muscles that had not been there before. His legs did not ache from sitting. His back did not stiffen. The fatigue he had carried for years, like a second skin, seemed thinner now, as if someone had turned down a dial he had not known existed. He flexed his hand. The grip felt stronger, not dramatically, not superhuman, just improved, like his body had been slightly recalibrated while he was inside the vault and no one had told him. Tony did not understand it. He did not try to. Right now, all he wanted was home. Maria was in the kitchen when he opened the door. She stood at the sink with her back to him. Her hair was tied up. Her waitress uniform was already on. Even though it was only mid-morning, the radio played something soft and unfamiliar. Tony stood in the doorway, his throat tight. "Mum," Maria turned. For a moment, she just stared. Her face moved through 3 emotions so fast Tony could not name them all. Relief, anger, love, maybe all at once. Then she crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and pulled him into a hug so tight his ribs protested. "Anthony," she whispered. "Anthony, Anthony, Anthony." Tony hugged her back. His hands were careful, gentle, as if she might break under the grip he now carried. "I'm sorry," he said. Maria pulled back, held his face in both hands, studied him like a doctor checking for damage. You look, she frowned, slightly different. Tony swallowed. Just tired. Maria's eyes narrowed. She did not believe him. Mothers rarely did. But she let him go and turned back to the sink, her hands shaking as she washed a mug that was already clean. "You will explain," she said. Her voice was calm, but underneath it, Tony could hear the tremor. "When you are ready." "You will explain." "Yes," Tony said. "I will." Another lie. Another door he opened, without knowing how to close. But Maria was alive. She was safe. She was here. Tony sat at the kitchen table and breathed. For the first time in 11 days, the air tasted like home. College resumed on Monday. Tony walked through the gates, carrying the same bag, the same jacket, the same face he had worn for 2 years. But the corridor noticed him, not with applause, not with whispers, just attention, heads turning, eyes catching, like a room where someone had adjusted the brightness of one light, and everything else looked slightly dimmer by comparison. Tony kept his pace steady, sat in his usual seat, opened his notebook, and then something strange happened. The lesson made sense, not in the normal way, not the slow understanding that came from reading and reading. The teacher began explaining supply chains and economics, and Tony understood the entire structure before she had finished drawing the diagram on the whiteboard. He saw connections, how one shortage created pressure somewhere else, how that pressure created opportunity, how opportunity created risk. It was like someone had cleaned a window he had been looking through his whole life. Tony frowned at his notebook. He had written 3 full paragraphs of notes, while the rest of the class was still copying the diagram. The girl next to him glanced at his page, then at his face, then back at his page. "How did you write all that already?" she asked. Tony shrugged. "Just paying attention." She looked unconvinced. In PE, it was worse. Not worse as in bad, worse as in noticeable. The class ran laps around the sports field. Tony had always been average at running. Steady, but unremarkable. The kind of runner teachers forgot about because he never won, but never stopped. Today, he finished first. Not by a huge distance, by a few seconds, but enough. Enough that the PE teacher looked at his stopwatch twice. Enough that the fast kids exchanged glances. Enough that one of them said, "Since when?" Tony bent over, hands on knees, breathing. His lungs were not burning. His muscles were not screaming. He felt like he could run it again. "Good work, Reyes," the PE teacher said, voice uncertain, as if he was not sure whether to be impressed or suspicious. Tony said nothing. He walked to the side of the field and drank from his water bottle. His hands were steady. His heartbeat was already back to normal. Something was different. Not wrong. Not supernatural. Just more. As if the version of himself that had entered the vault in Scotland had been returned with all the settings slightly improved. Stronger, sharper, steadier. He did not know why. The vault had taken his sensing ability. The sensing was gone. He could not feel danger or read the land. That subtraction was real and permanent. But something else had been left behind. Quieter, smaller, like loose change after a large transaction. Tony did not name it. He just noticed. And he was careful not to notice too loudly. Over the next week, Tony watched himself the way Ruth had taught him to watch a room. He measured, quietly, in class. His comprehension had improved. He could see patterns in data before the teacher explained them. His essays came back with higher marks. One teacher wrote in the margin, "Remarkable improvement. Keep this up." At the cemetery, where he returned to his shifts, his body moved more efficiently, lifting headstones he used to struggle with, scrubbing for longer without aching. The work felt lighter, even though the stones had not changed. And then there was the luck. Small things at first. So small, he almost missed them. He caught the train just as it arrived. Every time, no waiting, no rushing, just arrival. He found money on the ground twice in 1 week. A 20-pound note outside the post office. A 10-pound note near the tube entrance. Small amounts, but enough to notice. A parking ticket that should have been issued to the maintenance van he rode in was canceled due to a system error. An overcharge on the electricity bill was refunded without Maria having to call. A leak in the kitchen ceiling that had been dripping for months stopped on its own. None of it was impossible. All of it was just plausible enough. Tony sat in his room one night, staring at the ceiling, and whispered, "That's not normal." The consequence inside him stirred, cold and brief. Not confirming, not denying, just present. Tony reached for his phone and texted Zara. "Tony, have you ever heard of someone coming out of something better than they went in? Not by choice, by accident." 3 dots appeared. Zara, better how? Tony, just sharper, luckier, stronger. Not in a big way, in a way that adds up. A pause. Zara, Tony, are you saying the vault left something behind? Tony stared at the words. He typed slowly. Tony, I think it took something big and left small pieces of everything else. Zara, pieces of what? Tony thought of the 4 truths the custodian had shown him. Knowledge, fortune, strength, continuance. Tony, I don't know yet. He locked the phone and set it face down. Outside, rain began, light and steady, tapping the window like fingers on a table. Tony listened, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. It started with a headline. Tony was scrolling on his phone during a free period at college when he saw it. A small article on a financial news site he had started reading after the vault sharpened his understanding of systems. A British startup called Meridian Grid had filed paperwork for a new kind of battery storage technology. The article was buried at the bottom of the page. No featured image, no dramatic headline, just a paragraph about a company most people would scroll past. Tony did not scroll past. He read the article 3 times. Then he searched for Meridian Grid, found their investor page, read their technical summary, studied their leadership team. Something clicked in his mind. Not a supernatural flash, not a vision, just pattern recognition working faster than it used to. He saw it clearly. The technology Meridian Grid was developing solved a problem that 3 major energy companies had been struggling with publicly. Their timing aligned with a government funding round that was due in weeks. Their patent filing had been approved, but not yet reported by any major outlet. Tony was not a financial expert, but he understood systems now, and this system was about to move. He looked at his savings, the jar in the kitchen. The small account he had built from cemetery wages and birthday money and the disciplined refusal to spend on things he wanted. 2,043 pounds. A fortune for someone like Tony. A rounding error for someone like Eleanor. Tony hesitated. He thought of the vault, of fortune, of the vision it had shown him. Probability bending in his favor. Markets shifting. People losing things they did not know were connected. Was this the same thing? No. This was not supernatural luck. This was observation. This was reading a pattern that anyone could see if they looked carefully enough. The luck would come after. Tony opened a trading app on his phone, the kind Liam had helped him set up months ago for a school project. He verified his identity, connected his bank account. His thumb hovered over the buy button. 2,000 pounds. Everything he had. Tony thought of Maria, her tired hands, the bills on the table, the flat ceiling above his bed that never changed, no matter how hard anyone worked. He pressed buy. The confirmation appeared on his screen like a small, quiet explosion. Tony put the phone down. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. He went to the cemetery and cleaned graves for 3 hours. He did not check the app once. 3 days later, the government announced the energy storage funding round. Meridian Grid was named as one of 5 companies selected for fast-track development. Their stock price tripled overnight. Tony checked the app in his bedroom, sitting on the edge of his bed. The numbers on the screen did not look real. 6,000 pounds. He blinked, checked again. 129 pounds. Tony sat very still. Then the second announcement came. A major energy company had entered partnership negotiations with Meridian Grid for exclusive distribution of their technology across Northern Europe. The stock did not just rise. It exploded. Over the following week, Meridian Grid became the most discussed company on every financial forum Tony could find. Analysts scrambled to explain the rise. Investors rushed in. The price climbed and climbed, driven by a combination of genuine technology, perfect timing, and market excitement that fed on itself. Tony watched the numbers change. 12,000, 22,000, 36,000. On the 9th day, Tony sold. Not because the price had stopped rising, because his hands had started shaking. He sold every share, cashed out, moved the money into his bank account. The final number sat on his screen like a sentence written in a language he was still learning to speak. 41,860 pounds. Tony stared at it. That was not pocket money. That was not savings. That was a different life. His phone buzzed. Liam, mate, please tell me you got in on Meridian Grid. Tony, yeah. Liam, how much? Tony locked the phone. Some doors were better left closed. Tony knew he should stop. The smart thing, the safe thing, the thing Ruth would have told him to do, was to take the money, pay the bills, help Maria, and be quiet. But curiosity is a door too. And Tony had learned that some doors you push, even when you know what might be on the other side. He bought a lottery ticket, not the main draw, one of the secondary games, the kind with odds that were bad but not impossible. The kind where matching 5 numbers could win you a large sum, but not the life-changing jackpot that put your face on television. Tony chose the numbers without thinking. Let his hand move. Let whatever was left of fortune's residue guide his pen across the slip. He paid £2 and put the ticket in his pocket. He forgot about it for 3 days. On Thursday night, he was heating rice for dinner when his phone buzzed with a notification from the lottery app he had downloaded out of habit. You have a winning ticket. Please check your numbers. Tony's hand paused over the microwave. He opened the app. 5 numbers matched. Prize, £1 million. Tony set the phone down on the counter, very carefully, as if it were made of glass. He stood in the kitchen. The microwave beeped. Tony did not move. £1 million. He had spent £2. And now he was standing in a kitchen where the ceiling had a water stain shaped like a question mark, holding a phone that said he was a millionaire. Tony felt nothing. No, that was not right. He felt something, but it was not joy. Not yet. It was the same feeling he had when the vault door opened for the first time. A sense that a threshold had been crossed and there was no crossing back. He picked the phone up again. Read the number again. 1 million? He thought of Maria, of the bills, of the flat, of the years stretching ahead, filled with shifts and exhaustion and rent that never stopped. He thought of buying a small flat. Nothing flashy, just safe, just theirs. A place where Maria could sleep without the floor shaking every time a lorry passed outside. Tony's eyes burned. He sat down at the kitchen table, put his head in his hands, and laughed. Not a big laugh, a quiet one, the kind that escapes when something inside you finally lets go. Then he stopped laughing because the consequence inside his chest shifted. Not warning, not alarm. Wait. As if something far away had just registered that Tony Reyes had bent probability a little further than the world was comfortable with. Tony swallowed. I know, he whispered. He knew. Every gift carried an unseen consequence. Every win had a cost that arrived later, dressed differently, wearing a smile. But right now, in this kitchen, with the microwave still beeping and the rain tapping the window and a water stain shaped like a question mark on the ceiling above him, right now, Tony let himself feel glad, just for a moment, just long enough to remember what hope felt like before it learned to be careful. Tony claimed the lottery prize through a bank appointment, quietly. No publicity option selected. No photographs. No press release. Just numbers moving from one system to another. He told Maria on a Sunday morning. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, still wearing her uniform from the night shift, her eyes half closed. Tony sat across from her. He placed a printed bank statement on the table between them. Maria looked at it. Her hands went still. She looked at Tony, back at the statement. Anthony, she said. What is this? Savings, Tony said, then corrected himself. And luck. I invested some money, and I won a prize. This says, I know what it says, Mom. Maria's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Is it legal? She whispered. Tony almost laughed. Almost. Yes. Completely legal. Taxes are already sorted. Maria stared at the number for a very long time. Then she put the statement down, carefully, as if it might evaporate. Anthony, she said again, and her voice cracked. Tony reached across the table and held her hand. We're going to be okay, Mom, he said. Maria's tears fell silently. She did not wipe them. She just held Tony's hand and let them come. For a moment, the flat in Acton was not small or tired or stained by years of making do. It was just a room with two people in it who had carried too much for too long. And for a moment, that was enough. Tony spent the money carefully. He did not buy a sports car. He did not buy designer clothes. He did not flood social media with photos of new things. He bought a flat, a modest 2-bedroom flat in a quiet street in Ealing, close enough to Acton that Maria's world did not have to change shape, far enough that the lorries did not rattle the windows. New paint, clean carpets, a kitchen with a ceiling that did not leak, a bedroom for Maria with a lock on the door and curtains thick enough to block the streetlights. Tony set up a savings account for bills, put the rest into a separate account he did not touch. He paid off the small debts that had been sitting in envelopes on the old kitchen table for years. He bought Maria a new winter coat, not expensive, just warm. Maria quit her early morning job, kept the evening one, not because she needed to, because she did not know how to stop working entirely. Stopping felt like falling. Give it time, Tony said. Maria smiled. A real one. The kind Tony had not seen since before his father died. The flat, filled with small changes. Food improved. Not restaurant food. Home food. Fresh vegetables. Meat that was not on its last day. Rice that was not the cheapest bag in the shop. Maria cooked adobo for the first time in years because she finally had the energy to stand in the kitchen without watching the clock. Tony ate at the new table in the new kitchen and tasted his mother's cooking and felt something he had forgotten existed. Safety. It lasted 3 weeks. The noise began with a look. Tony's economics teacher, Mr. Hadley, handed back an essay. Tony's mark was the highest in the class. Again, but this time, Mr. Hadley paused. Reyes, he said, this is university-level analysis. Where is this coming from? Tony shrugged. Just studying more. Mr. Hadley's eyes lingered. Not accusation. Something worse. Interest. Have you applied to any universities? He asked. Not yet. You should. I can write a reference. I know people at Durham. At Edinburgh? Edinburgh. The word hit Tony like cold water. Edinburgh, where he had been chased through stone streets, where Eleanor had first spoken his name like she owned it. I'll think about it, Tony said. Mr. Hadley nodded, but his eyes did not leave Tony's face. That was the first ripple. The second came from classmates. Tony had always been quiet, unremarkable, the kind of student you remembered existed only when attendance was called. But now people talked, not loudly, not cruelly, just constantly. Have you seen Tony's grades? He's acing everything. I heard he bought a flat, a whole flat. Who does that? At 19, he was gone for nearly 2 weeks. Said it was a family thing, but he came back different. Different? How? I don't know. Just you notice him now. Tony heard the whispers, the way he used to hear London traffic. Background noise that slowly became foreground. And with the whispers came the approaches. A boy called Stefan, who had never spoken to Tony before, sat next to him in the canteen. Heard you're good with money. Stefan said. Casual, like it was nothing. Tony looked at him. Who told you that? People talk. Listen, my cousin runs a property thing, always looking for young investors. I could connect you. Tony's stomach tightened. Opportunity. That was Vane's word. The word that had sounded warm and felt like a trap. No thanks, Tony said. Stefan looked surprised, then offended. Then he shrugged and left. But more came. A woman approached Maria at her restaurant job. Friendly, chatty, asking about the family, about Tony, about whether they had come into any good fortune recently. Maria said nothing, but she came home with her jaw tight and her eyes worried. People are asking about you, Anak, she said quietly. I don't like it. Tony felt the consequence shift inside him. Cold and certain. Money had not made him invisible. Money had made him loud. The email arrived on a Wednesday. Tony did not recognize the sender. The subject line read, Investment Advisory, Private Consultation. Tony opened it. Dear Mr. Reyes, your recent market activity has been noted by our analysis team. We specialize in supporting young investors with unusual insight. We would like to offer you a private consultation at no cost. Please respond at your convenience. Regards, Hargrove Capital Partners. Tony read it twice. Then he searched for Hargrove Capital Partners. The company existed. A real website. Real people. Based in London. Specializing in private wealth management. But something about the email felt wrong. Not the words, the timing. Tony's trading account had been anonymous. His lottery win had been claimed privately. He had told no one except Maria, Zara, and Liam. So how did Hargrove Capital know his name? Tony forwarded the email to Zara. Tony, does this look real to you? Zara replied within minutes. Zara, the company is real, but the email address uses a slightly different domain. Look at the spelling. Capital with 2 LS. Tony looked. She was right. The email address was not from Hargrove Capital. It was from a near identical domain. A mirror. A fake front designed to look real enough to get a response. Tony's blood went cold. Zara, Tony, someone is watching your financial activity. That is not normal market analysis. That is targeted. Tony, Eleanor, Zara, maybe, or someone worse. Tony deleted the email, but the damage was done. He was not just visible on the street anymore. He was visible in systems, in data, in the quiet digital world where money left trails, as clear as footprints in fresh snow. That night, Tony lay in his new room in the new flat. The ceiling was clean. The walls were freshly painted. The bed did not creak, but he could not sleep. He felt it again, the sensation of being watched, not the old sensing, which had been sharp and precise. This was blunt, a general unease, like standing in the middle of an open field, knowing binoculars existed. Tony pressed his palms against his eyes. He had wanted to help Maria. That was all. That was the beginning and the end of it. But the vault had taught him something he kept forgetting. Opening was easier than closing. And money, once it moved, never moved quietly. 2 days later, Tony walked past the cemetery on his way to a shift. A car was parked outside. Black. Tinted windows. Engine off. Tony's step faltered. The car had not been there before. The cemetery was not the kind of place that attracted expensive vehicles. Tony walked past it, did not look directly, used the shop window across the street to watch the reflection. Someone sat in the driver's seat, still, patient, watching. Tony kept walking. His heart beat harder, but he controlled his pace, controlled his breath. Fear is a signal, not a command. He entered the cemetery, picked up his tools, started cleaning, but his hands shook slightly as he scrubbed, and the old headstones stared back at him with names he could no longer find comfort in. Because the dead did not need him to be invisible, but the living did. Despite everything, there were good days. Tony did not forget this. He refused to. He came home one evening to find Maria in the kitchen of the new flat cooking, not rushing, not watching the clock, just cooking, humming a song Tony vaguely remembered from childhood. Something in Tagalog about the sea. The kitchen smelled of garlic and vinegar and soy sauce, the sound of oil popping in a pan, the warmth of steam rising from a pot of rice. Tony sat at the table and watched her. Maria glanced back. "What?" "Nothing," Tony said. "Just, this is nice." Maria's face softened. "It is, isn't it?" They ate together, slowly, without the pressure of shifts or budgets or the weight of things unsaid. Tony ate his mother's cooking and felt something loosen in his chest. Not the consequence. Something older. Something he had been clenching since his father died. Liam came over that weekend. He stood in the doorway of the new flat with his mouth open. "Bruv," Liam said. "Bruv, it's not that big," Tony said. "It's got a hallway," Liam shouted, as if hallways were evidence of impossible wealth. "An actual hallway. Where your shoes go." Tony laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came from somewhere deep and did not ask permission. Liam walked through the flat touching things, the walls, the countertop, the curtains, as if checking they were solid. "Maria," Liam called. "Maria, your son is a genius." From the kitchen, Maria's voice came back, warm and dry. "I know, Liam. I made him." Tony grinned. For a few hours, the world felt small and warm and safe. Liam ate too much. Maria told stories about Tony as a child that made Liam howl with laughter, and Tony cover his face with his hands. Rain hit the windows in steady patterns, and the new flat held it all inside like a cupped palm. Tony was 19. He was allowed to be happy, even if the happiness carried a shadow he could not shake. The headaches started the following week. Not migraines, not the ordinary kind that came from stress or tiredness. These felt different, deeper, as if something behind his eyes was adjusting to a frequency it could not quite hold. The first one came during a lesson. Tony was writing notes when a pressure settled across his forehead, sharp and sudden. He blinked, gripped the desk. It passed in seconds. The second came at home, standing in the kitchen, making tea. The pressure arrived, sharper this time, and his nose bled. Just a few drops. He wiped them away before Maria saw. The third came at night, in bed. The pressure built slowly, like something pressing against the inside of his skull. Tony lay still and breathed through it, counting seconds, waiting for it to pass. It passed, but it took longer. Tony sat up in the dark. His pillow had a small red stain on it. He stared at it. He thought of the vault, of the pain that came from speaking boundaries, of the custodian saying, "The human body is not built for this." Was this the cost? Not of the vault, of the money, of bending probability, even slightly, even once, of using a fractional gift without understanding its weight. Tony cleaned the pillow. He did not tell Maria. He did not tell Zara. He carried it the way he always carried things, alone. The approaches did not stop. A man in a gray suit appeared outside the cemetery one afternoon. He waited until Tony finished his shift, then fell into step beside him. "Mr. Reyes?" he said. Pleasant, professional. Tony kept walking. "Not interested." The man smiled. "I haven't offered anything yet." "You don't have to," Tony said. "The answer is no." The man's smile faded, not into anger, into something more measured. "Calculation. Your investment timing was remarkable," the man said. "Historically remarkable. People who achieve returns like that tend to attract attention." Tony stopped, turned. "From who?" he asked. The man held Tony's gaze. "From everyone." He handed Tony a business card. Plain, white, a name, a number. Tony looked at it. The card said, Hargrove Capital Partners. Tony's blood went cold. Not the fake domain this time. The real company. The real people. Which meant someone had first tried to reach him through a fake. And when that failed, they had sent someone real. Tony dropped the card. "Don't come back," he said. The man did not argue. He bent down, picked up the card, and walked away. Tony watched him go, and he felt it. Not the sensing. That was gone. Just instinct. The simple human recognition of a pattern that had started small and was growing. The cemetery, the school, the email, the man in the gray suit. Tony was becoming a signal, not a person. A signal, a blip on screens he could not see, noticed by people he could not name, filed in systems he did not understand. He walked home quickly, locked the door, and for the first time since returning to London, Tony wished he had never touched the money at all. His phone buzzed that night. Unknown number. Tony stared at it, then answered, against every instinct. Tony, Ruth's voice, clipped, tight. Tony exhaled. "How did you get this number? You're not hard to find anymore," Ruth said. "That's the point." Tony's stomach tightened. Ruth continued. "The keepers have flagged your financial activity. You moved too much, too fast, too visibly." Tony's jaw clenched. "I helped my mom." "That's all I know," Ruth said, and her voice was not unkind. "But the network doesn't measure intention. It measures movement. And you moved?" Tony sat on the edge of his bed, the clean, new bed in the clean, new room. "What does that mean?" he asked. Ruth's answer was steady. "It means Eleanor's organization has noticed. They now know you're in London. They now know your financial footprint. And they now know you have residual contact With the vault system, Tony's blood chilled. I didn't use the vault, Tony said. I used my brain. And luck. That's it. Ruth's pause was long enough to carry weight. Tony, she said quietly, do you really believe the luck was natural? Tony did not answer because he already knew. He had known since the lottery ticket, since the investment that was too well timed, since the trains that always arrived and the bills that always resolved themselves. The fractional remnants were not neutral. They were signals too. Every time fortune tilted in his favor, it left a trace, a ripple in probability that people like Eleanor could detect the way seismologists detected earthquakes. Tiny movements, measurable, trackable. Tony had not just spent money. He had rung a bell. And now everyone was listening. What do I do? Tony asked. Ruth's voice was the same tone she used for rules. Stop using it, she said. Completely. No investments. No gambling. No shortcuts. Live normally. Let the signal fade. Tony's throat tightened. And the headaches? Ruth was quiet for a moment. What headaches? She asked. Tony told her. The pressure, the nosebleeds, the sensation of something adjusting behind his eyes. Ruth's response was careful. That's the imbalance, she said. You've been drawing on fractional gifts without a system to absorb the cost. The body pays what the vault does not. Tony pressed his palm against his forehead. Will it stop? He asked. If you stop, Ruth said. Yes. Probably. Tony laughed once. Short and hollow. Tony, Ruth said. Wales is getting worse. The fracture on your map. It's widening. We will need you. Soon, Tony closed his eyes. I just got home, he whispered. I know, Ruth said. And this time, the sympathy was real. But the network doesn't wait for readiness. The call ended. Tony sat in the dark. The rain had started again, tapping the window in steady patterns. The same rhythm, the same patience. He thought of the vault, of the custodian's voice saying, power always subtracts something. He thought of Eleanor, somewhere in London, in a building, with glass walls and clean floors, looking at data. His data. His name on a screen. His financial footprint glowing like a marker on a map she had been reading for weeks. Tony looked at his phone. He opened his banking app. The number sat on the screen, bright and exact. Over £900,000 remaining. After the flat, after the debts, after the coat. Tony stared at it. 3 months ago, he had been a boy who cleaned graves. Invisible. Unremarkable. Safe. Now he was sitting in a flat he owned, with money in the bank and a body that felt stronger and sharper than it had any right to be. And none of it made him safer. All of it made him louder. Tony locked the phone, set it face down on the bedside table. The rain tapped the glass. Steady, patient, waiting. Tony pulled the map from his backpack, unfolded it across his knees. The Welsh fracture was darker than before, a thin crack running along the coast like a wound that would not close. His thumb throbbed, the old blood seal responding to the map's distress, like a nerve remembering an injury. Tony looked at the fracture, then at the rain on the window, then at the ceiling of his new room. Clean, white, unmarked, no water stain shaped like a question mark. But the question was still there. It had always been there. Not, can I afford to keep going? But can I afford not to? Tony folded the map. He turned off the light. And in the dark, the consequence inside his chest shifted once. Quiet, cold, patient as stone. A reminder, a warning, a promise that the money was never the test. What followed would be. End of episode 5. Money changes the noise. The Scottish vault holds. The signal is loud. And Wales is cracking. Tony Reyes came home, helped his mother, and rang a bell he cannot unring. Now, Eleanor knows where he is. Now the network knows he has been spending gifts he was never supposed to touch. And the Welsh fracture is widening every day he waits. He gave up his edge to seal Scotland. He spent what was left on the people he loves. And now he walks into Wales with empty hands, a body that carries phantom costs, and a map that only ever points toward what comes next. This is Story Run. The vaults do not open for the ready. They open for the necessary. And the run continues.